Hello, citizens of the world. If you're returning to the channel, welcome back. And if you're new around here, my name is Courtney Keeley, and I am the founder of Open Up. This past week was Transgender Awareness Week, officially November 13th through the 19th. And while we posted something on our Instagram that gives a little bit of insight into the transgender immigrant experience, we wanted to go in more depth than just one post. Apologies for yet another pause in the exploitation series, but we really wanted to talk about this. For this video, I'll be pulling from Megan Collier and Megan Daniels' piece, The Production of Trans Illegality, Cisnormativity in the U.S. Immigration System, Alex Redkay, Wade Laquette, and Mackenzie E. Huggins' piece, Immigration and Asylum for Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Individuals, and lastly, from Samara D. Fox, Randy H. Griffin, and John E. Pachankis' study, Minority Stress, Social Integration, and Mental Health Needs of LGBTQ Asylum Seekers in North America. A quick note, when I am referring to the non-heterosexual and non-cisgender community, I will be using the phrase LGBTQ+. But if I am saying a direct quote, I will be using the acronym that the authors use. Collier and Daniel describe cisnormativity as the hierarchical system of power that structures legal, administrative, and policing systems that simultaneously produce both the hypervisibility of gender variance and the erasure of trans identities. For example, Redkay et al. Note that U.S. immigration law has imposed bans on LGBT individuals, using demonizing language and preventing LGBT individuals from entering the U.S. until 1990. The impact that cisnormativity has on immigration is very prevalent in the way that undocumented immigrants are detained. In these detention facilities, there are difficulties in housing trans detainees and vulnerabilities to sexual assault and violence. When people are detained, they are often separated according to sex assigned at birth and not gender identity. This puts a spotlight on transgender immigrants, making them easy targets for violence. According to the Redkay et al. Piece, detainees who identify as LGBT are 15 times more likely to be sexually assaulted than those who identify as heterosexual or cisgender. Again, this is about anyone who is identifying as LGBTQ+, not specifically transgender individuals. From their research, Collier and Daniel have found that those who express gender variance are more vulnerable to criminalization, state intervention, and surveillance. With all of these factors increasing, and this is my own input, I would think that the fear of being deported would substantially increase. Again, this is something I am just suggesting could be a reality, given the increased likelihood that their documentation status could be discovered. Many immigrants' documentation status is described as liminal legality, meaning that it shifts between undocumented and documented. This is considered incoherent legal documentation. As Collier and Daniel note, state agencies, employers, and healthcare providers overwhelmingly require gender categorization and coherent legal documentation for participation. Transgender folks do not always have the same access to formal legal documentation, as many of these methods rely on familial support. Redkay et al. Claim that boundaries surrounding male identity, traditional female roles, machismo, and Marianismo emphasize cultural norms that limit and punish behaviors falling outside of such gender expectations. In Mexico, these boundaries extend to healthcare. Treatment is purposely denied and withheld from transgender individuals because of their gender identity. In making cases for asylum, LGBTQ+ people have been asked to prove their identity. They have been denied asylum because they did not report abuse to local law enforcement at the time the abuse occurred. And they have been held to a higher standard of providing evidence for the persecution they experienced in comparison to other groups who flee persecution. A lot of this was impacted by the 2017 Ninth Circuit Court decision Bringas Rodriguez v. Sessions, especially considering the burden of proof necessary in determining if an individual has experienced past persecution. From my understanding of the case, It should not be the persecuted individual's responsibility to provide evidence that the government in question did not do enough to prevent their persecution. The Fox et al. Study looks into mental distress among asylum seekers in North America. Before I discuss the study's findings, I want to take the time to point out, as the researchers themselves did, that there were only a small number of transgender respondents, making up only about 12% of the 308 respondents. Fox et al. Found that those who were transgender were 3.6 times more likely to screen positive for mental distress. LGBTQ immigrants are more likely to have difficulty establishing their social networks as well. There is risk of facing persecution related to their identity, which they often associate with their own country, while cultural and linguistic barriers prevent them from forming connections with LGBTQ communities in their host country. Support systems are essential for everyone, but they are especially necessary for those trying to navigate the U.S. immigration system. I lend my voice to the study's call for mental health care access for asylum seekers, especially those who do not have support systems. One more thing before I end for the week. I know that a lot of this was focused on the broader LGBTQ community and not specifically transgender individuals. One thing mentioned in every piece that I read for this week was that there needs to be more research done on the experiences of transgender immigrants. I want to emphasize this call because the cisnormativity under which our society functions ignores, and by extension, erases transgender experiences. With that, don't forget to sign up for the email list, give the Instagram a peek, subscribe to this channel, and give this video a like. Until next week, citizens of the world, goodbye.